Hey guys, tonight we step barefoot onto the wind-smoothed ridges of the Ethiopian highlands. Where the air is thin, the sky is endless, and the moon above you hangs like a polished bone disc. There's no streetlight here, no honking taxis or push notifications. Just dry grass whispering in the dark and the crunch of stone beneath your soles. If you hold still long enough, you might swear you can hear the rustle of robes, the scrape of chisel against basalt, and someone murmuring an equation they'll never write down. You're about 2.500 meters above sea level. And yes, that altitude's making your head swim a little. That's fine. Dizziness is part of the experience. But don't get too cozy, because while we're here to explore ancient Ethiopian astronomers and their shadowy moon mapping methods, you probably won't survive this journey if you're expecting neat timelines or tidy museum labels. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward, guided only by moonlight. There's a path beneath your feet, but it's not paved, just the faint groove left by countless hooves, sandals, and curious souls before you. The wind picks up. It smells faintly of ash and thyme. Here, where the sky seems to rest closer to the earth, ancient people looked upward and found meaning in the moon's measured dance. This wasn't just stargazing for romance or poetry. It was practical. Life or death. When to plant, when to fast, when to move the herd, when to bury the dead. It all hinged on understanding those silver crescents drifting across the velvet sky. Historians still argue whether these early Ethiopian observers were formal scientists or simply very good at guessing. But the evidence suggests they weren't just gazing, they were measuring. Counting nights, watching shadows bend and shrink. And they did it all without telescopes. Without charts, just intuition, repetition, and a deep trust in the cycles of the world. You stop to catch your breath. A rock crunches underfoot, flat, wide, unnaturally smooth. You crouch. Run your fingers along it. Etched lines, faint, but deliberate, could be a millstone, or a primitive lunar calendar. One that only works if the moon hits it at just the right angle on just the right night. A nearby owl hoots, utterly unimpressed. There's a fringe theory, one of my favorites, that some of these highland stones were arranged not just to frame solar phenomena, but to track lunar ones. It's tricky, since the moon's path isn't as fixed as the sun's. But some believe that through painstaking observation, ancient Ethiopians learned to predict not just moonrise and moonset, but the exact days when the moon would hang low and golden, or vanish in eclipse. Not bad for people without apps. You keep walking. The silence is thick here. Not oppressive, just full, like the landscape is listening back. And somewhere deep in your bones, you realize the moon you're walking under is the same moon they watched. No software update. No version 2.0, just that old, cratered globe, pulling tides and turning heads. A breeze ripples across the grasses. You wrap your shawl tighter. This kind of night invites contemplation. You try to imagine the first human who looked up and saw the moon not as magic, but as a map, a pattern, something to be decoded. Did they know what they were starting? The Ethiopian highlands are a patchwork of microclimates, hot valleys, cool ridges, misty hollows, and it's easy to see how different groups might have interpreted the same moon in very different ways. One village might see it as a blessing, another, an omen, a third might see it as a goat's eye watching from above. That's the beauty of oral tradition. Everyone gets a version. You pass a thorn bush, snag your sleeve, you curse softly, then remember. These plants were used in some rituals to filter moonlight. Don't ask how. Nobody agrees on the details. But somewhere out there is a journal article that insists placing thorn branches at certain angles help track the moon's shifts. Makes about as much sense as tying a string around your finger to remember your cousin's birthday. But hey, it worked for them. Your eyes catch movement, just shadows, but they fall long and clean across the stones now. You stop, watch. The moon is high, almost full. It casts shadows you could measure with a ruler. You remember hearing that in some parts of ancient Ethiopia, night shadows were more important than sundials, because people cared more about lunar time than solar. Odd, right? Most cultures worship the sun, timed things to it. But here, The moon had a kind of quiet dominance. Maybe because it was visible. More personal. The sun just blinds you. The moon? It speaks. You settle on a flat rock. Pull your knees to your chest. And you wait. You let the moonlight soak in. You imagine yourself as one of them, a lunar priest. Perhaps. Or just a tired herdsman with a gift for observation. You don't have scrolls, just time, and a need to understand. And so you watch, night after night, for years, until the patterns reveal themselves. Until the moon stops being mysterious and starts being predictable. Comforting. A celestial metronome. And that's when you realize, you're not alone out here. You never were. The grass hisses softly as you push through it. Dew now beating on your arms. A reminder that you're walking in a place ancient and alive. The moon has shifted slightly westward. And with it, your perspective. You crest a small hill, and there it is. A stone circle. It's not grand, not Stonehenge, not some towering monument that makes tourists squeal. This one is humbler, quieter. Dozens of basalt columns, weathered and leaning like old men at a town meeting, ring a flat clearing, each one barely your height. Some have toppled, most stand. All of them cast shadows that, if you're paying attention, point in curiously different directions. You step into the center, careful not to disturb anything. There's a smooth slab at your feet. You kneel and run your fingers across it, tracing faded grooves, some straight, some curling. You pause. One particular groove dips just slightly deeper. It leads toward one of the stones that's directly catching the moonlight. Coincidence? Maybe, but you're already thinking like they did. Everything here might mean something. Mainstream archaeologists say many of Ethiopia's stone circles, like those in Tia or Gedio, are burial markers. And sure, some are, but others? The ones not associated with any grave goods, any bones, any offerings? These might be something different. Alignments suggest some were placed to chart lunar rise points during solstices and equinoxes. If true, they're not tombstones, they're timekeepers. You shuffle to another marker. Its top has been chipped in a tidy V-shape. You stare through it, and find the moon neatly framed inside. That feels deliberate. You sit again, because sitting seems to be the best way to understand anything here. And slowly, the story behind these stones starts to unfold. These weren't random, not tossed up like scarecrows. Some were spaced according to sight lines. Others arranged so that during particular nights, especially full moons in dry season, their shadows would cross a central marker. A kind of celestial clockwork, ticked forward not by gears, but by gravity and patience. Here comes the quirky part. There's an old French claim that a few of these circles had moon bowls, shallow depressions or carved vessels placed atop central stones, filled with water to reflect the moon. When the reflection aligned with a shadow, that was your signal, for planting, or for warning, or for dancing, depends which elder you ask. Historians still argue whether these were tools of empirical science or props in theatrical rituals. Some say both. You don't have to choose tonight. Just lean back and let the silence of the stones whisper at you. Suddenly, a breeze stirs your hair and carries with it the distant bark of a hyena. Fitting. Hyenas, in some Ethiopian myths, are moon chasers. Their cries are said to warn of eclipses. Their laughter echoing the moon's vanishing act. It's a stretch, sure, but your brain is softening around the edges. Everything feels connected now. You lie down, flat on your back. The stones rise around you like teeth in the earth. Above, the moon glides westward, slow, sure, serene. And you realize something funny. If this was a timepiece, you are inside the dial. Not the hand, not the minute mark. You are the thing being told. Maybe that's what these ancient astronomers understood, more than just when to harvest barley or hold a festival. Maybe they knew something we've forgotten. That time doesn't happen to us. We happen within it. And then, almost too softly to notice, the shadow of one stone begins to stretch across the slab, toward the shallow groove you traced earlier. Your heart beats once, twice, 3 times. It crosses. You exhale. Someone, thousands of years ago, would have smiled at that moment. They would have known something important had just happened. Maybe a child would be born tonight. Maybe the rain would return. Maybe nothing at all. But the moon had made its move. And the sky had responded. And now you're part of that same rhythm. You sit up, rubbing your neck. The rocks are cool. Your bones are stiff. But your mind? Soft. Open. You look at the circle once more before stepping out of it. A little slower now. A little more reverent. And just before the edge of the hill, you glance back and whisper, "Thank you." Because it's starting to make sense. You shuffle downhill now, following a path worn by wind more than by feet. A few tufts of grass catch the moonlight like little silver torches, lighting the way down into a hollow where something warmer glows, flickering orange against dark stone. A fire, crackling softly, built with care. You can almost smell the dry eucalyptus smoke curling through the air. You settle beside it, letting the warmth soak into your chilled hands. It's quiet here, but not empty. You feel watched, not in a scary way. More like someone's keeping an eye on you to make sure you don't burn the lentils. The fire is surrounded by odd little objects. A gourd half full of milk. A carved wooden stick with strange notches. A leather pouch tied shut with sinew. You pick it up. It jingles faintly. Pebbles? Seeds? Ancient secrets? You set it down. No need to disturb the past too rudely. This is where you start to understand how fire, moonlight, and memory braided together in Ethiopian life. See, while the stars moved predictably, the moon's cycle was the heart of the calendar. Not just for stargazers, but for farmers, for priests, for midwives. Every flicker of this fire would have once been a count. 1 night, 2 nights, a waxing crescent, a swelling orb. Each glow helped keep time, especially during the new moon, when there was nothing to see in the sky. That's when the fire became a stand-in, a flame to mimic the moon you couldn't watch. Calendars in Ethiopia weren't always etched in stone, they were recited, counted off in song, woven into lullabies and morning chants. There's a fringe claim that in some mountain villages, children were taught lunar months by how long it took to dry certain herbs. Calendrical botany, if you will. You glance up at the stars. They're brighter now. The fire throws dancing shadows across a nearby rock wall. One looks vaguely like a horned beast. You blink, and it's gone, but your brain's already filling in the rest. In the Ge'ez script, the ancient liturgical language of Ethiopia, still used in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, there are records of fasts, feasts, and observances all tied to lunar phases. One Ge'ez manuscript mentions the moon that comes weeping, likely a poetic name for the waning crescent. Another calls the full moon the watcher of promises, which honestly sounds like a Netflix series waiting to happen. Historians still debate whether Ge'ez scribes tracked the moon for agricultural precision or religious choreography. Maybe both. Probably both. Always both. You lean closer to the fire, eyes half-lidded now. This heat is hypnotic. You imagine elders sitting like this, calling children close. There are 13 moons, one would whisper, 12 for the months, and one for the dead. You'd shiver. They'd laugh. The 13th moon, in some stories, was the one that came when it wasn't supposed to, the one that made people forget their names, wander off into the mountains, and return change, if they returned at all. You chuckle. Every calendar needs a little flair. One of the most overlooked facts about ancient Ethiopian lunar observation is its sheer longevity. Some scholars believe the highlands were using lunar calendars well before the rise of Aksum, possibly back to the 5th or even 6th millennium BCE. That's older than writing in most parts of the world. They weren't writing it down, but they were living it. Calendars weren't static pages, they were ritual. Spoken, moving. You poke at the fire with a stick. Sparks lift off like fireflies. And just like that, a mental image strikes you. A priest, cloaked in wool, drawing lines in ash to explain the moon's phases to a gathering of wide-eyed kids. The fringe tidbit? Some of those priests allegedly used animal horns as lunar teaching tools, scraping the horn with a mark for each night until the full moon was reached. When the horn was full of marks, the moon would be full too. That's either coincidence or an early version of a lunar app made from goat parts. You can't decide whether that's brilliant or horrifying. The moon's light is still strong, but it's moved again. You glance up, tracking it the way they did, without tools. Just intuition and a fire's reflection in your eyes. You get it now. Why this mattered so much. The moon was the only thing that moved slow enough to follow but fast enough to matter. The stars stayed put. The sun came and went, all blinding and bossy. But the moon? The moon changed, night to night, story to story, always in flux, always just out of reach. You feel something pull at your memory, something modern, Wasn't there a smartwatch face based on moon phases? You almost laugh. High-tech moon magic that still doesn't tell you when to milk the cows. Another gust of wind. The fire wobbles. You stand, brush off your hands, and leave the warm circle behind. The fire will die, but the moon won't. Not tonight. And somewhere far away, someone else might be looking up at it too, wondering which night of the calendar it is. Maybe they don't know. Maybe they don't care. But you do. You walk on, the fire's warmth fading behind you, replaced by a crisp stillness that seems to cling to the night air like dew. The moon sits higher now, casting a cold silver glow over the stony path ahead. You follow it as if it's leading you somewhere, like it has a secret to tell. If only you walk far enough, quiet enough, and then, you hear it, not the rustle of wind or the bark of some distant hyena, but a murmur, soft, rhythmic, ancient. You turn toward the sound and find yourself at the edge of what looks like a dry riverbed. Its sides carved smooth by centuries of seasonal rains. Etched into the walls, barely visible in moonlight, are faint characters, curved, intricate, old. You step closer. The symbols are Ge'ez. You probably haven't read Ge'ez lately. Don't worry, most people haven't. It's an old Semitic script, still preserved in liturgical texts, chanted by candlelight in Ethiopian monasteries. It predates Amharic. It predates even coffee, which honestly feels almost impossible. And yet, here it is, markings older than any road you've walked on. What's stranger is the layout. These aren't just random verses or religious scrawls. They seem to cluster in patterns. Some follow curved lines, others spiral. One cluster forms a narrow arc that, when you lean sideways, could mirror a moon's monthly path. Could, maybe. You squint. The possibility hums in your bones. There's a theory, a niche one. Sure, but fun to entertain, that early Ge'ez scribes encoded astronomical knowledge within hymns and psalms. Not in the text itself, but in how they were structured. Verse lengths, repetitions, pauses, subtle mnemonics to help priests track the phases of the moon while chanting. Think of it as Gregorian chant meets lunar calendar. Historians still argue whether this theory holds water or just smells faintly of incense and wishful thinking. But you want it to be true. It feels true here, where the rocks echo with a whisper you almost understand. You touch one of the carvings. It's smooth, but worn, like it's been traced 1,000 times by fingers who wanted to remember something. You do the same, feeling a connection pass down your arm like a slow electric current. Not painful, just ancient. Suddenly, a memory surfaces, something you read once about how early Ethiopian texts sometimes annotated moon sightings not with numbers, but with metaphors. The moon crouched low like a waiting lion. The sky swallowed her light like butter in flame. Not exactly helpful for NASA, but incredibly vivid for oral tradition. And maybe that was the point. You don't need to be precise when you can be poetic. When the world is your clock, and your heart is the metronome. You look up again. The moon hasn't moved much, but the shadows have. The edge of the riverbed now glows faintly, lit by the angled light reflecting off some mineral in the stone. You follow it, your foot falls silent on the packed earth. As you walk, you pass another carving, this one fresher, simpler, a crescent moon surrounded by dots. 13 of them, a nod, perhaps, to the 13-month calendar still used in Ethiopia today, 12 months of 30 days. And a mysterious little, 13th month of just 5 or 6. Pagum, they call it, the month of leftover days. The waiting room of time. Fringe idea alert. Some believe Pagum was once lunar-based, a way to catch up the solar and lunar calendars. Others say it's just a mathematical shrug. Historians don't quite agree. You don't mind. The idea of a limbo month feels weirdly soothing, like a breather from life. You keep walking, now tracing a slow arc along the riverbed wall. The moon's light, bouncing and refracting, plays tricks on the shapes carved into the rock. Some seem to shimmer. One briefly looks like a rabbit, another looks like, well, you're pretty sure that one's a pizza. That's probably just sleep deprivation. Still, even modern science recognizes the power of metaphor. NASA uses supermoon and blood moon because perigee syzygy of the Earth-Moon-Sun system doesn't exactly stir the soul. Ancient Ethiopians didn't need Latin. They had fire, stone, voice, and a moon that watched them back. You sit, once more, Not out of exhaustion, though. Let's be real. Your legs aren't thrilled, but because this place demands stillness. It's easy to imagine someone else sitting here before you. A scribe, maybe, whispering aloud as they carved. Not just to remember, but to be remembered. You take out a small notebook. You didn't plan to use it, but it feels right. You scribble a few lines. The moon slips between stars like a priest between pews. She speaks in light and leaves no echo. Not bad. You hum it under your breath. It fits the rhythm of the Ge'ez lines above you. For a moment, you feel part of the same tradition. Then, a shadow shifts. Your own. The moon's moved again. Time to move on. You rise slowly, bones creaking like old floorboards, and brush dust from your palms. The carvings fade behind you as the path curls into a patch of thorny scrub. Dry branches snag your clothes with little whispers, like the plants are trying to hold you back. Whispering, don't forget, you won't. The moon's riding high now, and you follow its pull through the brush until the landscape opens suddenly into a rocky plateau. Here, the air sharpens, and the night feels vast again. Wind dances across the open space, carrying with it that strange hush that only comes when the earth is holding its breath. Above you, the moon floats fat and glowing. And now, your thoughts drift toward the stories people told to explain that light in the sky, before the priests. Before the calendars, the myths, the legends, the talking shadows and lunar twins. You remember hearing one of them before. Maybe in a dusty book or a YouTube comment section that went strangely poetic. In some Ethiopian traditions, the moon isn't just a thing. It's a pair. Twins. In fact, two spirits locked in a cycle of parting and reunion, one growing brighter, the other fading. Over and over, one ascends as the other bows. A cosmic seesaw of light and shadow. You grin. It's romantic and tragic in equal measure. Like if Romeo and Juliet became celestial bodies but still couldn't quite sync up. Mainstream history doesn't bother much with these tales. Too unquantifiable. But oral history? Oral history lives for this kind of thing. Every waxing crescent becomes a smile. Every eclipse, a moment of reunion or disaster. Historians still argue whether these stories were born from observation or projected onto the sky after the fact. Did the people see twins in the moon's shifting face? Or did the twin myth already exist, waiting to be reflected in the heavens? It doesn't matter, really. What matters is that they saw something. They watched the sky and gave it names. Personal names, family names, and that kind of familiarity made the moon part of their world. Not just something hanging above it. You move forward and nearly trip on a low, curved stone, a crescent shape, half buried in dirt. You kneel and brush away the dust. Carved on its surface is a circle flanked by two figures with elongated arms reaching toward it. Lunar twins? A pair of dancers? A very confused goat and its reflection? Hard to say. You squint and decide not to decide. In many Ethiopian regions, these myths of the moon came with rituals. Singing, drumming, sometimes fasting. Sometimes, if the moon disappeared too long, they'd light fires and chant. Calling it back, it wasn't superstition. It was responsibility. You didn't just watch the moon, you cared for it. You pause and let that idea sink in. Caring for the moon, like it's a friend, not a rock, like it needs you. Modern minds might scoff, but your phone's in your pocket, quietly calculating tides, and you know deep down we haven't really moved on from treating the moon like it matters. We just pretend we're cooler about it now. The wind picks up again. You tighten your jacket and keep moving. A few steps later, you find a pile of flat stones stacked in a spiral, waist high. Another ritual marker? Or just someone cleaning up after goats? You don't know, but the arrangement feels intentional. A symbol, maybe even a map. There's a fringe theory that some ancient highland groups used stone spirals to teach moon cycles, each stone representing a night. Spiraling inward to the dark moon, then back out to fullness. A visual aid before PowerPoint. You walk around it slowly, counting. 29. That tracks. You let out a low whistle. You can picture it. A mother showing her daughter the stones. Here's the first night. Here's the fullness. Here's when the water buffalo were born last year. Remember that. Memory wrapped in metaphor. Knowledge passed down like a recipe. But cosmic. You crouch beside the spiral. Hands resting on your knees. The moon hangs low now, tipping toward its descent, casting long shadows that stretch out like fingers across the stones. You wonder how many people have knelt here before you. How many looked up and whispered to the light, asking it for guidance, or forgiveness, or just a little extra rain. You whispered too. Not words. Exactly. Just breath. Intention. Something the moon probably won't hear. But maybe the twins will. Behind you, the wind shifts. For a second, it feels like someone's standing there. You turn quickly. No one. Just your shadow. Joined now by the long, looping shadow of the spiral. Maybe it's not a spiral at all. Maybe it's a shadow trap. A place designed to catch the moon's trail in stone. You grin again. Too sleepy to trust your own thoughts. But also too sleepy to care. That's the perfect place to be right now. Just awake enough to believe in ancient twins who dance across the sky. And as you step away from the spiral, your own shadow curls and fades behind you, blending with 1,000 others who once followed the same light, believed the same stories, and watched the same moon drift toward its hiding place beyond the hills. The plateau falls away beneath your feet, and you begin to descend. Not in a dramatic, cliffhanger kind of way, but with the slow, stubborn grace of someone who's realized that everything important is always a little downhill from wherever you are. You crunch through gravel, your knees protesting gently, as the moon hovers behind you like a guardian with commitment issues. Ahead lies a low plain, patchworked with scrub and the faint ghosts of old animal paths. You can almost see the herds that once moved through here, goats, cattle, camels maybe, led by sharp-eyed nomads who knew how to read the sky better than a college graduate with a smartwatch. This was livestock country, still is, in places. And the moon? The moon was more than a nightlight. It was a calendar, a whisperer, a biological clock with silver hands. You imagine being a herder thousands of years ago, with no spreadsheet, no calendar app, just your animals and the heavens, and somehow, it all worked. Here's the neat fact. Many pastoral communities in ancient Ethiopia timed their entire herding cycle around the phases of the moon. They'd track fertility windows, migration timing, and even milk production based on what the moon was doing. Waning moon? Less travel. Waxing moon? Time to move, time to mate, time to be awake and alert. Some of that still persists today, if you talk to the right elders. One old Oromo shepherd once told a researcher, "The cows walk lighter during full moon," which either means the cows like the moonlight, or the guy was a poet pretending to be a farmer. Honestly? Possibly both. You stop by a shallow depression in the land, now filled with thorny shrubs. Long ago, it might have been a watering hole, a place where herders would camp for a few nights, sit around the fire, watch the shadows lengthen, listen for signs, both animal and celestial. A soft bleat pierces the air. You freeze, heart thumping. Then realize, it's just your imagination, trailing behind like an overexcited goat. Still, the sense of presence here is strong, like you're walking through a memory that hasn't quite faded. There's a fringe theory that some highland herders used specially trained dogs to signal moonrise. Not for science, just because the dogs would howl when the first crescent appeared. Built-in lunar alarms with fur and fleas. One scholar even joked that Ethiopia had the world's first, bark-based, lunar alerts. Historians still argue whether these behaviors were deliberate observations or just cozy coincidences. But when you're lying on your back under a cold sky, waiting for a sliver of light to show up so you can decide whether to breed your sheep, you start noticing patterns. And eventually, those patterns become law. You reach a large flat rock where the trail briefly widens. You sit, you breathe, you look up. The moon's still there, lower now, but burning clear. A gibbous glow, not quite full, not quite gone. It spills across the plain, illuminating tufts of grass and the occasional termite mound like someone laid out glow-in-the-dark snacks. And you get it. You get why ancient herders trusted this thing. The moon was reliable, not like the weather, not like the herd, not like your brother-in-law who swore he'd return the donkey cart last week. The moon kept its rhythm. It gave just enough light to walk by, but not so much you forgot it was night. And when the herds needed to move, across dry riverbeds, up into greener highlands, down toward lower pastures, the moon helped them choose their time. Traveling under a half moon meant better visibility, cooler temperatures, and fewer predators. It meant arriving at the next grazing spot with animals alive, milk still flowing, and dignity intact. You lean back, palms pressed against the stone. It's surprisingly warm. like it's been soaking up heat for centuries. You close your eyes and imagine a herder sitting here long before you, marking the days with notches in his staff, singing to the moon in a language no one's spoken in 500 years. The songs, if they existed, are gone now, but maybe the rhythm lingers. In footsteps, in the sway of tall grass, in the hush that falls over the land when the moon finally dips behind the hills. There's a soft whistle on the wind. Not quite a tune, not quite natural. You turn. Nothing, just air moving across stone. But it feels like a lullaby. You stand again and look out across the plain. The path continues, faint but visible, leading toward a darker patch in the distance, trees maybe. Or a rocky outcrop. You don't know yet, but you'll follow it, because the moon's still showing the way. And your feet still work. And you've got nowhere more important to be than exactly here. Exactly now. You take one last glance at the horizon, where low hills are etched in silver. A few stars wink overhead. But it's the moon that holds your gaze. That ancient shepherd's lamp, that reluctant spotlight. And somewhere out there, someone else might be watching it too, maybe not herding goats. Maybe just herding thoughts, but still moving forward under the same glow. The plain gives way to uneven ground. And your steps become more careful now. Rock peeks through dirt like bones through skin. The moon helps, though its light has dimmed a little. Growing softer, like it's starting to get sleepy too. You smile. You know the feeling. Soon, you come across a scatter of stones, not just natural ones, but deliberate, arranged. You kneel beside one. It's been carved, faint, shallow, but unmistakably human. A series of small, round pits dot the surface like freckles on an old face. Some are deeper than others. Some are arranged in lines. Others, in spirals. Your fingers find them one by one. They're star pits. Or at least, that's what people call them now. Ancient rock carvings scattered across Ethiopia. From highland ridges to low valley walls. Nobody's quite sure what they are. Game boards? Ritual markers? Secret code for goats? But one theory, your favorite theory, is that they were maps. Not for the land, but for the sky, and specifically, for the moon. You trace a curved line of dots and wonder. Was this the arc of a lunar month? Were these pits used to track the waxing? Did someone move a pebble each night, one pit at a time, until the moon was full again? It sounds simple. It probably was, but simple doesn't mean stupid. There's an old belief that in some places, people used ostrich eggshells to mark time. Not full eggs, though that would be funny, but fragments. Hollowed, cleaned, and painted. Some say they'd set the pieces inside these pits, moving them as the days passed. Like lunar bingo. Others say the eggshells were used to catch moonlight. Their curved surfaces reflecting the sky back in miniature. It's the kind of thing archaeologists love to argue about. Some call it genius. Some call it guesswork. One even called it cosmic scrapbooking, which is either an insult or a very cool album title. Historians still argue whether these pits were functional calendars or just artistic doodles made by someone with too much time and a sharp rock. But you run your hand over them and feel a kind of quiet precision. The spacing's not random. The patterns repeat. Someone put thought into this. A gust of wind passes through, lifting dust and the faint smell of sage. You sit back and glance around. More stones, more pits, a whole cluster, a constellation carved into earth. You picture an ancient observer sitting cross-legged here, eggshell in hand, counting the nights since the last full moon. They probably weren't a priest or a scientist, just someone with chores to do, a family to feed, and a need to know what tomorrow might bring. And so, they watched the sky, mapped it in rock. We like to think of astronomy as the realm of scholars. But most of it began with farmers and herders just trying to figure out when to plant beans and when to stay inside. You notice one set of pits arranged in a wide curve, with a single pit off to the side. A mistake? An eclipse marker? Or just a place to set your tea? You chuckle and realize that some mysteries stay fun precisely because they're never solved. The fringe idea here? That these pits weren't just maps, they were teaching tools. Some scholars suggest parents would walk their children through them, explaining the sky night by night. This is the first moon. This is the one when the rains start. This is the one when your uncle gets cranky. That kind of thing. It makes sense. You're more likely to remember something if you can touch it. If you can move a stone. Feel the dip. Mark the change. That's how humans learned, before chalkboards. Before syllabi. Before YouTube. You lie back on the stone, your head pillowed by your pack. The sky above is vast. The moon's light has cooled, but it's still there, slipping westward. You imagine the pits glowing softly, like tiny lanterns carved into the ground, flickering in time with the lunar rhythm. You think about how the eggshells must have looked off-white, maybe painted with ochre or charcoal, nestled in the stone, fragile against time, and yet somehow part of it. A kind of lunar origami. One fold per night. There's something deeply human about it, taking something as big as the moon and shrinking it down to fit between your hands. Not to control it, just to understand it, to feel like you have a say in the rhythm of things. You exhale, long and low. The wind hums through a nearby crevice. A low, breathy sound that rises and falls like chanting. You're not sure if it's the wind or your imagination, or maybe both. Taking turns. You sit up again, brushing dirt from your back. The pits are still there. Unchanged. The sky is still there. Unchanged. And yet you feel change. Just a little. Like a pebble moved one pit closer to full. The carved stones recede behind you, fading into the hillside like ancient thoughts tucked back into the earth's pocket. You descend again, this time into greener land. The air shifts. Warmer. Wetter. The dryness of the highlands gives way to the soft hush of valleys where moisture lingers in leaf and soil alike. The grass here is taller, heavier, and you start to hear things, distant insects, the occasional drip from a tree branch, the shuffle of something small and unseen moving through undergrowth. This place is older, in a different way, less sky, more roots, less silence, more whisper. You've crossed into the lowlands now, an entirely different Ethiopia. Different tribes, different customs, different moons, because while the highlands worshipped precision, shadow lines, and mathematical stone circles, the valleys dealt in ritual, in stories, in sound, and they had their own way of reading the moon. You pass a grove of broad-leafed trees, some marked with notches or strange swirls of white ash. A few carry bundles, dried leaves tied with twine and bone, hanging from their branches like warnings or invitations. You're not sure which, but you tread lightly. You reach a clearing where a circle of stones surrounds a bare patch of ground. It's charred, burnt smooth, a fire pit, old, but not forgotten. Beside it lies a small wooden bowl. Overturned, you lift it. Beneath, a handful of pale seeds. Dry now. Once planted? Once eaten? Maybe neither. Maybe they were offerings. Maybe they were moon food. Here's a strange truth. In some Ethiopian valley communities, the moon wasn't just a calendar. It was a guest. When it appeared, people greeted it. When it vanished, they sang to bring it back. Some called it the visitor with silver feet. Others said it carried messages from the dead. Not a cold rock in space, a being, a mood, a relationship. Historians still argue whether lowland lunar traditions influenced highland astronomy, or vice versa. Some say they evolved separately. Others insist they were always trading ideas across hills and rivers, like recipes passed between neighbors. The truth? Probably messy and beautiful, like most human things. You sit on a log, slick with moss, and listen, not for voices, exactly, but for echoes. These valleys once pulsed with night rituals, especially during new moons. That's when the sky went dark and the veil between worlds felt thinner. People would gather, drums would sound, the air would buzz. A fringe theory claims that some valley groups used lunar reflections in water to trigger trance states. Not because they were high, but because the light dancing on the surface helped focus the mind. A kind of natural meditation app, minus the subscription fee, and in those states, they'd speak the names of their ancestors, ask for guidance, and offer thanks. You try it yourself. There's a puddle nearby, ringed in reeds. You squat beside it and let the moon reflect across the surface. It shimmers, broken by ripples, smudged by breeze, but undeniably there. A light that comes from above, yet floats just inches from your fingers. You reach toward it, not to touch it, but just to see how it wobbles. The moon dances. For a second, it looks like two moons, side by side, overlapping. Lunar twins again? A coincidence? Or is this what started the idea in the first place? This watery mirror showing more than one truth. You sit back and watch the reflection settle. Somewhere in the trees, a night bird calls. Once, twice, then silence. You imagine a ritual held here. Long ago, people dressed in bark and beads, Faces painted with ash and ochre. The drumming starting slow, then building. The moon overhead, small but full, and all around it, voices, chanting its name, praising its return. In one tradition, the moon was said to fall ill during eclipses. People would sing to it, hoping to nurse it back to health. Some communities would burn herbs, frankincense, resin, even crushed roots believed to heal. They'd wave the smoke toward the sky, like sending up a prayer in mist. You lean back on your elbows, picturing it all, and for a second, you wonder if the moon felt it. If the moon missed them when they stopped. You won't be reenacting any rituals tonight. But being here, hearing the crickets, feeling the damp press of night, watching the moon's reflection ripple in a forgotten puddle, you get it. You understand how something so far away could feel so personal. Because it's not really about the moon, is it? It's about the people watching it. You rise slowly, legs stiff, knees popping like bubble wrap. The bowl, the seeds, the soot, all still in place. You leave them untouched. This isn't your ritual to revive. As you walk, you whisper something, not quite a prayer, not quite a goodbye, just breath, and the moonlight catches your shoulder like a nod. You pass through the last trees and back into open air. The highlands are gone behind you. The lowlands, too, fading into their own misty silence. And overhead, always overhead, the moon keeps watch, half reflected, half remembered, entirely itself. You climb again, not high like before, but just enough to get above the valley's breath. The air dries out, the stars return, the moon is lower now, drifting westward like a boat running out of river. You follow a ridge that hums with stillness. Everything here feels paused, like even the earth is waiting. And that, you realize, is exactly how debates about ancient Ethiopian astronomy feel, paused, waiting for clarity. Because here's where the clouds roll in. Not just in the sky, though yes. A few wispy ones have appeared. But in the records, the evidence, the theories, this is the murky part of the story. The part where everyone's sort of guessing and sort of arguing. And no one really agrees on what the ancient Ethiopians actually knew. You sit on a flat stone and pull your jacket tighter as a cool wind dances past. Perfect time for a scholarly squabble. Here's the big one. Did ancient Ethiopian astronomers predict lunar eclipses? Some say yes, emphatically. They point to stone alignments, oral traditions, and even ancient manuscripts that reference the moon being swallowed on certain nights. That sounds a lot like an eclipse. Others say, hold on, cowboy. They argue that predicting an eclipse isn't just about watching the moon. You need a lot of math, a solid grasp of the lunar-solar relationship, and the ability to recognize long-term cycles like the Saros. That's a big leap from counting moon pits and stacking stones. Still others float in the middle, suggesting that, while maybe not mathematically precise, Ethiopian observers likely noticed patterns. They might have known, for example, that after a certain number of full moons, a bad moon might come. That's not modern astronomy, but it is predictive behavior. It's like knowing that every third full moon, someone's cow mysteriously gives birth to twins. Is it science? Is it magic? Is it coincidence? Yes. You shift your weight, feeling the stone cool under your hands. It's kind of comforting. This ambiguity, like arguing over who made the first pizza, fun, inconclusive, and ultimately delicious either way. The fringe idea? That a group of monks in northern Ethiopia, sometime in the 12th or 13th century, developed a rudimentary eclipse chart using string, sticks, and a brass mirror. The source is sketchy. No one's found the chart. But the idea lingers in academic corners like a ghost that refuses to leave the library. You like the story, though. You picture a bald monk squinting at moonlight reflected in a bowl of water, muttering calculations to himself as goats wander through the courtyard behind him. Whether or not they could predict eclipses, it's clear they cared. Some traditions treated eclipses as moments of danger, others as sacred silence. Still others saw them as time for ritual correction, making amends, forgiving debts, feeding the hungry. Imagine that. The moon disappears. And your first thought is, better go make peace with my cousin. You stand again and continue along the ridge. The moonlight is dimmer now, partially from the thin clouds above, but also just from the hour. It's moving into that slow fade before sunrise. The air smells of dry grass and distant stone. You hear a jackal bark once. And then nothing. As you walk, you find a strange shape rising from the slope, tall, narrow, and gleaming slightly. You approach. It's a slab of polished stone. Standing alone, its face carved smooth. On it, faint patterns, a circle, a spiral, a notch on one edge, and what looks like a dragonfly? You tilt your head. The symbol doesn't make sense. Maybe it's not a dragonfly. Maybe it's a comet, or a lunar deity, or the world's worst attempt at a cow. Whatever it is, it's been placed deliberately, at eye level, facing east, as if waiting for the first touch of dawn. Historians still argue over these solitary stones, whether they marked astronomical events, territorial claims, or were just sky markers to point out notable celestial events like equinoxes or eclipses. Some even suggest they were part of larger constructions that eroded or were dismantled over time. You sit down in front of the slab, moonlight glancing off its surface like water on metal. You run your fingers across the carvings. They're shallower than the ones earlier in the night. Softer, but they're still here, still legible, if not in meaning, then in presence. And that's enough. Because even though clouds roll in, literally and metaphorically, you've come to understand something. You don't need a telescope to be an astronomer. You don't need formulas or charts or star maps. You need time, you need eyes, and you need a reason to care. The people who watched the moon from these hills and valleys had all three. You lie back on the ground, arms folded behind your head. The moon peers through the haze now, still bright, still itself. You think about those arguments, the missing data, the unverified claims, and then you laugh, softly, under your breath, because if the moon were listening, it wouldn't care what people argued. It would just keep going, rising, waning, hiding, returning, quietly powerful, quietly patient. You close your eyes and let the wind roll over you. The moon will keep its secrets a while longer. You wake, not from sleep exactly, but from one of those deep, time-melting drifts where your body stays still, and your thoughts dissolve like sugar in tea. The moon's light has changed again. It's lower now, a slow curl sinking toward the distant hills. There's a faint golden blush along the eastern sky. Dawn isn't far. You sit up and stretch. Something creaks. It might be your back, or it might be the earth itself. Either way, you're moving again, boots scuffing over stone and brittle grass. The path winds downward into a shadowed gully. The air here is colder, still soaked in the last breath of night. The landscape narrows, folds inward. You feel like you've stepped into a throat, a passage between waking and dreaming. Ahead, a cave, low, dark, and uninviting, like the kind of place characters in bedtime stories are told not to go. So naturally, you duck inside. Your eyes adjust slowly. The smell hits first, earth, damp moss, and something faintly metallic. Then your hands brush against the walls, smooth in places, rough in others. And there, just barely visible, are marks. Not carvings, not paint, scratches, circular, angular, some overlapping, some deliberate. You run your fingers along one and feel the story underneath. This is where the oral tradition lived when no one dared speak aloud. Because this cave, you realize, was a moon cave. In parts of southern and western Ethiopia, there are legends of sacred caves used for eclipse rituals. When the moon disappeared, especially during a full eclipse, people would gather in places like this, shielding themselves from the sky, chanting to call the moon back. Sometimes they'd bring animals, sometimes herbs, sometimes silence. There's a fringe belief that the acoustics of these caves, low, resonant, like a drum held close, were part of the ritual. That the chants weren't just for comfort, but meant to echo in just the right way, bounce off the walls, reach the sky. Historians still debate whether these rituals were pre-Aksumite or borrowed from nearby cultures. Some claim echoes of Egyptian or Nubian influence. Others insist they're uniquely Ethiopian, shaped by the land, the language, the moonlight over eucalyptus groves. You shift deeper into the cave. It's warmer here, oddly, and you can almost hear the sound, not literal. Not now, but tucked inside your chest. That kind of imagined echo that plays when the air gets heavy. You crouch by the far wall. More marks. These ones arranged like crescents. Not perfect half-moons, but not random either. As if someone was trying to show the moon fading, shrinking, vanishing. You wonder how that felt. Thousands of years ago, watching the full moon suddenly vanish. Not dim, Not fade, just gone. Swallowed. You'd call it death, or punishment, or a sign. And what did you do? You sang. You made noise. You banged drums and rattles and bones. You begged it to come back. There's one oral tradition that says the moon is a woman who hides when we forget her. That eclipses are her way of sulking. Not celestial mechanics, just feelings. Honestly, relatable. Another tale says the moon is eaten during an eclipse. By what? Depends on who you ask. A lion, a snake, a hyena made of stars. In one story, the creature can only be driven away by laughter, which means that at the height of the moon's vanishing, people would tell jokes. Bad ones, loud ones. Kids would run around howling. The more ridiculous, the better. Anything to scare the darkness back into hiding. You can't help but smile. Imagine being told, the moon's dying. Quick, be funny. Outside, the air shifts again. A bird calls. Faint, but certain. You step out of the cave. Blinking in the early light. The moon is now ghostly pale. Barely hanging above the trees. You watch it. It seems tired. Or maybe you're just projecting. At your feet is a ring of stones. Long disassembled, but still whispering their shape into the grass. You pick up one, not to keep. Just to feel the weight. It's smooth, rounded. You set it down again. No need to disturb the arrangement. Even a broken circle is still a circle. You turn slowly, letting your eyes follow the horizon. Everything feels softer now. The hills, the sky, the space between your steps. The world is tilting toward morning. And yet, somehow, you're still inside the night. And you realize something. We talk about eclipses like they're events. Temporary. Start, peak, end. But for the people who lived by moonlight, who counted days with shadow and sang to craters in the sky, those moments were living things. Moods, wounds, warnings, portals, even a moon that vanishes is a reminder. The sky isn't ours. We only borrow its light. You inhale deeply. The air tastes like ash and promise. And you keep walking, because there's still more story ahead. And the moon, faint though it is, still follows behind. The moon, now paper thin and drifting westward like a retreating thought, hangs behind you as you climb toward another outcropping, this one different. Sharper, more angular. It juts from the ground like a tooth. And you wonder if the earth is yawning. Up close, it's clear. This was once a site of measurement. You can feel it in the way the space is arranged, too flat to be natural. Too purposeful to be accidental. And scattered around its edge are objects. Half buried in soil, weathered, forgotten. You crouch and brush dirt from the nearest one. A spoon. Not your usual cafe cutlery. It's heavy, metal, dented, handmade. Decorative notches line the handle. You find another nearby, a broken bell. Maybe brass. Beyond it, something that looks like a curved plate or even a small reflective dish. Not quite a mirror. Not quite not. What is this place? A makeshift observatory? A ritual site? An open-air kitchen for really strange midnight snacks? Here's where it gets weird. Some Ethiopian oral traditions mention tools like spoons, bells, and shallow bowls being used during moon ceremonies, not for food, but for sound and shadow measurement. When the moon hit a certain height in the sky, a bell might ring to mark time. A spoon's shadow on a marked surface might indicate a phase. A bowl of water could reflect the moon and distort its image depending on angle and time of night. Is that science? Historians still argue whether these were actual instruments or simply symbolic, ritual objects imbued with meaning after the fact. But the theory persists that sound, reflection, and shadow were early tools in the lunar toolkit. You pick up the spoon again. It's cool in your hand. Simple, ancient. You tilt it, letting the moonlight glide across its bowl. It flares briefly, then dims, and you imagine a priest or skywatcher doing the same. Centuries ago, waiting for just the right gleam to declare a new month. Another odd belief floats up from memory. Some valley groups tied small metal discs to trees. When moonlight hit them just right, the reflection would shine down on specific stones. If the light landed on the center marker, time to plant. Missed it? Try again next month. You can't rush the moon. You move toward a narrowed trench dug into the stone, now half filled with soil. At one end is a small pile of round pebbles, each one notched with scratches. Maybe it's just erosion, maybe not. You imagine this as a lunar ledger, each pebble a day, each notch a phase. Someone sitting here at night, moving pebbles along a groove, recording time not with ink but with presence. You run your fingers along the trench, still smooth in places, still waiting for someone to use it. You shift, and your foot bumps something buried just beneath a tuft of grass. You dig with your fingers and pull free a bent piece of metal, thin, curved, the edge sharpened to a strange arc. A tool? A ritual blade? A compass for mapping moonrise angles? Or someone's ancient hairpin? The fringe theory? That some of these objects weren't just passive instruments, they were interactive. Held up against the moon, aligned with certain stones, worn or wielded during observation. You remember one article, probably written at 3 a.m. by a sleep-deprived grad student, that referred to these tools as shadow choreography instruments. Which sounds pretentious, but kind of perfect. Because when you think about it, that's what this was. A dance between light and darkness, between the moon's position and the tools we use to understand it, between knowledge and belief. A dance performed every night, with spoons and bells as backup singers. You sit on the edge of the stone platform. The wind here is steady now, brushing your cheek like a slow exhale, the kind that happens after a long-held breath. You look out at the landscape, now dimming into pre-dawn. Trees are outlines, hills are ghosts, and still, the moon lingers, less a spotlight now, more a whisper. You think about how quiet observation can be. How watching something as simple as the changing shadow of a spoon could become a sacred act. How knowledge, when repeated, becomes ritual. And how ritual, when remembered, becomes identity. You press your palm flat to the stone beneath you. This was someone's lab. This was someone's church. This was someone's classroom. All at once. And maybe, just maybe, it still is. You linger for a while longer on that flat stone platform, just you, the wind, and a spoon that probably hasn't been held in 1,000 years. But the moon is slipping. And your feet, ever faithful, pull you onward. The path leads you toward rising ground again. Though this time it's less rugged, more ceremonial. The trees thin out, and the air starts to carry a different scent. Incense. Maybe, or just memory. There's something regal about this part of the journey. And then you see it, sprawled across the highland like a half-forgotten crown. The ancient city of Axum. Well, what's left of it? Ruins, pillars, mounds, the skeleton of a kingdom that once held court with Rome and Persia. But you're not here for the gold or the obelisks or the carved lions, though those are cool. You're here for something quieter. Because hidden among these imperial relics are the footprints of royal stargazers. Axum wasn't just a trade hub or a military power, it was a place of observation. Kings consulted the heavens, priests tracked lunar phases, and decisions, big ones, were made based on what the moon was doing. Should we plant? Should we fast? Should we go to war? Ask the sky. You stroll through a broken gateway and into what might have once been a courtyard. The ground beneath your feet is paved in uneven stone, the moonlight slipping between cracks like water finding its level. There's a niche carved into the far wall. Small, shadowed, possibly nothing, possibly everything. You crouch beside it and find faint markings. A crescent, a cross, a bird. They're barely there, like someone tried to hide them or like time simply wore them away. But they hint at a different layer of history, one where celestial observation was entwined with power. See, there's a strong theory, mainstream, this time, that the priestly class in Axum served double duty, religious leaders and astronomers. They weren't just lighting incense and giving blessings. They were also measuring night, recording patterns, advising kings based on the rhythm of the moon. Some texts suggest that royal coronations were timed with full moons, more specifically, the second full moon after the spring rains. The idea being that a new king, like a new crop, must rise in alignment with the heavens. Logical, poetic, and probably pretty effective PR. Historians still debate just how much scientific method these royal stargazers actually had. Some say they were deeply mathematical, using shadow lengths and angular measurements passed down in secret. Others think they relied more on tradition, what grandma saw, what grandpa counted, what the goat did on the last full moon. You run your fingers along the carvings, wondering which king stood here, what he saw, what he feared. There's a fringe idea, admittedly romantic, that certain rulers in Axum were chosen because of their celestial knowledge. Not just their bloodline, but their ability to interpret the moon. Candidates might have been tested, When will the next eclipse happen? How many days until the next new moon? If they got it wrong, maybe they were told to keep herding goats instead. You don't know if that's true, but you like it. You pass into another chamber, roofless now, but the walls still high. The acoustics are startling. Your breath echoes. The moon glints off one stone pillar, revealing another spiral, just faint enough to be missed unless you're really looking. A calendar? You trace the spiral, heart steady, breath slow. You feel like you're retracing footsteps, like you're walking behind someone who was always just out of reach. And that's the thing about ancient astronomy. It's not about the stars or the moon or the math. It's about wanting to understand. It's about sitting in the dark and wondering, what does that mean? And then building your entire world around the answer. Axum did that. They built temples, cities, rituals, and calendars, all under a moon they could never quite hold, but always trusted. You step back out into the courtyard. The moon now brushes the edge of the western hills. Its light pale and stretched. It's fading, but it's still watching. You imagine the royal stargazers standing where you are now, draped in linen and wool, their hands behind their backs, their eyes fixed on the sky, not just out of curiosity, but duty. And somewhere, behind them, a king waits for news. The ruins of Axum slip away behind you, swallowed once more by shadow and silence. Your path dips gently now, winding through scrub and stone, toward what looks like a cluster of boulders half buried in tall grass. At first glance, it's nothing special, just a pile of rocks. But as you get closer, you see the shapes, the edges, the weathered surfaces not worn by chance, but chiseled, lifted, arranged. This is a calendar, not the kind that hangs on your kitchen wall with a kitten for every month. This is older, heavier, and entirely unwilling to explain itself. You approach the largest stone. It leans slightly, like it's listening, and carved into its face are a series of marks, deep grooves, small notches, and something like a crescent laid horizontally. You squint. It could be anything, but it feels like something. You run your fingers across the grooves. Some are long, almost like tallies. Others are crosshatched, and off to one side. 3 shallow circles, unevenly spaced. It's not decorative. It's not random. This is one of Ethiopia's so-called calendar stones, monoliths and stone clusters thought to track solar and lunar rhythms. Possibly both. Some are arranged in circles, some in lines. Others, like this one, stand alone but carry markings that suggest tracking, of days, of moons, of cycles. Mainstream historians believe these stones were used to count lunar months. A few argue they mark equinoxes or solstices, with shadows falling on specific lines only during key nights of the year. Like a sundial, but sneakier, moonier. You walk slowly around the stone. The ground here is uneven, intentionally so. A small trench runs from its base to another, flatter stone lying in the grass. When you crouch beside it, you notice the groove between them lines up perfectly with the horizon. And just above that horizon? The fading sliver of moon. Coincidence? Not tonight. You sit cross-legged and imagine someone kneeling here centuries ago. Not a priest, not a king, just a watcher. Someone with the kind of patience that only comes from having no clocks and nowhere better to be. Night after night, they watched the moon rise, measuring the shadows that crossed these stones, counting time in quiet. There's a fringe theory, a delightful one, that says these calendar stones weren't just observational tools. They were conversation partners, that watchers would whisper to them, tell them what they'd seen, ask them when the rains would come, when the herds should move, when to bury the dead. Because sometimes, it's not about knowing the answer. It's about being heard. Historians still argue whether the calendar stones were part of a single system or many small ones. Some claim regional cultures developed their own lunar models, tied to local plants, weather, even animal behavior. Others say there was a shared method, lost now, spread orally and adjusted as needed, like a recipe passed down but tweaked by every cook. You lean your head against the stone. It's cold, solid, comforting, like leaning into a story older than language. There's a worn path etched into the grass leading from the central stone to another, smaller one a few meters away. You follow it and find more marks, less precise, more worn. This one has concentric circles carved into it, the center almost invisible now. It's been kissed by too much rain, stepped on by too many goats, Forgotten. But not quite. You press your palm to its surface. And for a moment, it feels warm beneath your skin. Probably just the stone catching the last bit of moonlight. Probably. You think about how time was once a place, a stone, a shadow, a groove in the earth. Before calendars. Before iPhone reminders. Before anyone had a reason to say, 4:15. People came here. They watched. They marked. They remembered. They didn't need a name for what they were doing. They just did it. And maybe that's the most human thing of all, trying to make sense of what repeats. What returns. What disappears and reappears like it's keeping a secret from you. You stand once more, brushing dirt from your palms. The grass sways around you, whispering nothing. The moon dips lower. The wind changes direction. And as you look back at the stones, these ancient, quiet witnesses, you feel like you're leaving behind more than a sight. You're leaving behind a conversation. One you were lucky enough to eavesdrop on for a while. You step away, and the stones remain, still, solid, watching the sky, just like they always have. You descend once more, leaving behind the stones and their stubborn silence, following the narrow footpath etched into the earth by centuries of wandering feet. The moon is barely clinging to the horizon now, a smear of pale gold behind distant hills. The stars grow sharper as its light weakens, but your thoughts still circle back to it, your quiet companion through the long night. The trail widens near a field where wildflowers peek through tufts of grass. And beyond that, a cluster of stone huts, some roofless, others leaning, slumped like dozing elders. You approach one and sit against its wall. It feels like the kind of place people used to gather to talk, eat, maybe argue about who was supposed to watch the goats. But mostly, you imagine them naming the moon. Because now, you're thinking about language, how people from different regions, different tongues, different beliefs all had names for that same white globe in the sky. And every name meant something. In Amharic, they say Sadeh for full moon. It sounds soft, soothing. In Oromo, the word is Bishan, a name also meaning water, because the moon, to them, is connected to tides, fertility, nourishment. In Tigrinya, the moon is high, sharp, direct, but carrying poetic resonance, like a blade held in moonlight. And those are just the official tongues. Go deeper into the villages, and you find nicknames, secret names, the eye above, the slow wife, the white ear, even the sister who never talks. Because language is how you pull the moon into your own life. Your own story. You run a finger along a bit of graffiti scratched into the wall beside you. A word, maybe, or just a swirl, maybe a child's early attempt at naming the sky. There's a theory, only half fringe, really, that these local moon names weren't just linguistic quirks, but encoded knowledge systems. The name would tell you something about the moon's behavior that month, or its phase, or what tasks were tied to it. Like saying, blood moon, and knowing there's drama ahead. A built-in calendar, spoken aloud. Historians still argue whether this naming practice was spontaneous or structured. Some think elders passed down standardized moon names in ceremonial chants. Others say it changed based on need, mood, weather. You get the feeling both are true. Language doesn't like to sit still. And the beauty of this? It wasn't just what the moon was called, but who said it. In one region, only women named the moon. In another, it was the role of the eldest son. In a few rare cases, the moon was named collectively. During ceremonies where the village would vote on what to call the next moon based on how the last one treated them. Petty, yes, but undeniably charming. You stand again and wander toward a stone bench, or what's left of one. You sit and imagine the elders gathering here, mumbling about the moon like old men mumble about politics and potatoes. Ah, this one's the lazy moon. Someone mutters. No, this is the greedy moon. Took the rain, didn't give it back. A chorus of agreement. Someone spits. Someone laughs. Someone says, let's call her Gillet, the forgetful one. And everyone nods. You smile. The moon, in these stories, is never passive. She's not a sphere of rock 384.400 kilometers away. She's a person, sometimes helpful, sometimes annoying, sometimes late, often mysterious but always present. And that's what language does. It brings the unreachable down to earth. It gives the sky a face. You look up one last time. The moon is almost gone now, hugging the horizon like it's not quite ready to leave. You whisper its name, though you're not sure which to use. You try them all. Sadeh, Werhai, Bishan, Gillet. They all feel right. None feel complete. That's okay. Because this moon has worn many names. In many mouths. And each one meant someone was paying attention. The wind picks up gently, ruffling the grasses at your feet. Birds stir in the distance. Somewhere, a rooster clears its throat with entirely too much confidence. You stretch your arms. Your body is tired, but your mind is humming, full of names and stories and people you'll never meet, but somehow now feel connected to. Because when you name something, you keep it alive. And the moon, thanks to all those voices, has never stopped living. The moon is almost gone now, just a whisper of gold barely skimming the horizon. A fading memory with light edges. The air has shifted completely. It's no longer night, not yet day, but that peculiar in-between when things feel fragile. Like the world still deciding whether to wake up or roll over. You follow the last stretch of path, which leads you up a gentle slope. The land opens again, wide and quiet, and at the center of it all is nothing. No stones, no ruins, no trees, just a patch of earth. Perfectly bare, perfectly flat. You stop. This, somehow, feels like the most sacred place of all. There's no monument, no markers, but it's where everything you've seen, every pit, every tool, every whispered name, starts to settle into shape. You breathe in, slow, deep, the kind of breath people only take when they realize they're at the edge of something. Or maybe at the center. Because this place isn't where the astronomers watched the moon. This is where the moon watched them. And you. This field, this sky, this last quiet breath of night, none of it needs proof. The people are gone, the stones remain in pieces. But the light, the rhythm, the intention, still here. There's a feeling you get when the world is so still it starts to hum. Not with noise, but with weight, history pressing gently on your shoulders. Not to crush you, just to remind you that you're part of it. And you realize, all at once, the moon didn't just belong to the people who watched it. It still doesn't. It belongs to everyone who's ever tried to understand it. You, them, the child in the next village waiting to see their first eclipse. The shepherd scratching notches into a staff. The elder whispering a moon's name with cracked lips. It's all the same story. One you've now joined. You sit cross-legged in the middle of the clearing. Your shadow is long and thin. There's no one around, but you feel surrounded, by watchers. By names. By echoes in a tongue you'll never fully know. And for a moment, you forget the modern world exists. No clocks, no headlines, no calendar dates, just a sky, a moon, and a ritual of remembering. There's a final, fringe belief you recall, tucked into the notes of a long-dead anthropologist. Half dismissed by his peers. It says, the true calendar is not in the stones, but in the silence between when the moon is seen and when it is missed. You don't know what that means, but you feel it anyway. Historians will keep arguing. New theories will come and go. Old ones will be dusted off and dressed up like they're fresh. But the moon? The moon will keep rising, keep waning, keep disappearing and returning. It doesn't need to explain itself. You rise slowly, stretch, and look to the east. Light is coming, thin, soft, and rising like steam over the distant hills. The last of the stars begin to blink out, and the night breathes its last. Behind you, the moon sinks fully into the earth. Gone for now, but not forgotten. Not by you, not by them, not by anyone who's ever looked up and thought, you again. I remember you. And now, the sky is turning pale. The stars have faded, the hills are stretching in silhouette, and the last breeze of night sighs gently across the grass where you stand. You feel it in your shoulders, in your breath, in the long quiet that fills the air like soft cotton. There's no need to rush, no need to speak. The moon is gone now, tucked beneath the horizon like a lamp being gently set aside. But its light lingers, in the back of your thoughts, in the edges of your dreams. This was never really about the moon itself, not entirely. It was about the watching, the waiting, the rhythm of people long gone who still leave fingerprints on the sky. It's comforting to know they were there. It's comforting to know you are too. The field is still, the stones are silent, and above you, the blue of morning is blooming slowly, petal by petal. You lie down, the ground is cool beneath you. The light is soft, and the world, ancient and unfinished, begins another cycle. Sleep now, if you haven't already. The moon will return. It always does.